Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I'm Coach Kim, and I am talking today about not working out. I talk a lot about exercise and about how many different kinds of exercise are great, and the most recent studies about the connection between the exercise and longevity, and exercise and brain health, and exercise and so many other things. Performance in running, which I'm particularly fond of because I am a long distance running coach. But today I am talking about what happens when you're not moving around, because one of the things that I see a lot, and I actually just also talked about this in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, about what happens in between exercise sessions and why it's so important for your body to savor the non-exercise time in your life, as well as to really push yourself and do the work that you have to do physically in order to stay healthy and stay alive. And keep your quality of life up. So let's talk today about first why it's so difficult to distinguish between resting or not exercising and then just not doing anything, between sort of the passive approach to exercise by avoiding it, by not doing it, versus exercise in engaged exercise when you're out pushing yourself and really trying to adhere to a regimen, particularly at the beginning of the year when people tend to be really focused on their health through New Year's resolutions and all the craziness that goes on towards the end of the year when we're enjoying ourselves over the holidays. But because that sort of differentiation, the words we use to describe the way that we live are important. And there is a lot of research has been conducted on, particularly, I write about this in my book, particularly on astronauts and how their sedentary lives affect their not just their body's physique in terms of their energy level and their metabolism, which we know is affected by being in space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but then we're also going to talk a little bit about this amazing documentary that I've just seen parts of for the first time. I'm in the process of trying to get through. It takes me a while to get through actually a full-length film, and this is called Game Changers, and it's about how plant-based foods are better in terms of what your body needs for recovery, and how animal-based foods may be sapping the body's ability to recover, to fully rest and be ready for movement. And then finally, I want to talk about the way that we approach exercise and how our schedule for sessions and exercise, we tend to think of workouts as, kind of the best way to do things is to go and beat yourself up. To like the intensity of the workout is so important to people. And we've seen this in fitness trends over the last several years, from boot camps and things like, Spartan and Tough Mudder and really intensive military style hardcore training and events, to HIIT training and intervals, like heavy duty interval work in gyms and gym based sessions. And so sort of like this idea that we really need to go hard or don't worry about it or don't do stuff is an element we're trying to fight on the more practical side of exercise where I live, which is to say that sometimes, a light session and stability work, exercises that allow your physique to be in complete control and to really hone in on the ways that the functional ways that your body is meant to move, are also really practical ways to spend your time in terms of your activity time. So we're going to start with why we talk about or why our sedentary bodies are so susceptible to injury and damage, and thus need that recovery time so much, because I want to talk a little bit about this work that was conducted at NASA. A woman named Dr. Joan Vernikos, who is a former life sciences director. She was worked for NASA and many years, is retired now, and her work, her business was around making sure that astronauts' bodies were prepared both before and then after, monitored during space flights, and then coming back to Earth, how that time away from gravity spent in the in space, how it affected them during their trips, and then how it affected them afterwards, and how they got back to human existence on Earth once they were back on Earth. And so I'm not going to get into the specifics of the details of astronauts' bodies, because that's a particular, very narrow, kind of a focused sort of body of work. But it's applicable to everyone else, right? So this is important. We're not astronauts. We don't leave Earth, most of us, like 9.9% of us, right? Keep our feet on the ground all the time. But the thing that Dr. Vernikos wrote about that I just find incredibly fascinating is this concept that we've reached the point in our modern lives where we're almost creating a quasi-anti-gravity condition for our human bodies here on Earth. We have gravity. It's bearing down on us all the time, but we don't interact with it. We just kind of let it bear down on us, and in many ways, that's the motivation part to get up. I just had a conversation this morning with one of my clients here in New York City about how sometimes you give in to the idea of moving, to like sort of sink into your chair or your bed or whatever, if you're not feeling up for a workout, whether it's a bike ride or a swim or a jog or a session with your trainer. You just give in, skip it, and you feel sometimes better, but more often than not, you don't feel that much better. And this happened to me yesterday. I fought moving myself so hard. I just did not want to get up and go outside. And so I tricked myself in a little bit of a way that helps me, just because my life is crazy with, my work, and I'm an elected official in the New York City school system, and I have a family to raise and a house to run and all this other stuff. So I tricked myself by forcing myself to jog my errands for the day, and that was my movement. And of course, I felt better afterwards. You always do, right? You never feel badly that you did end up getting motivated. So this component of gravity bearing down on the just the sort of energy to make the decision to like take that first step, that is real. And because we don't really need to lift our bodies up and sort of acquire stuff all that much for our lives, for this existence that we hold in life, we don't need to go out and hunt and gather food. We don't need to we don't need to protect ourselves, generally speaking, from the elements. So we can sit and work with our devices and pretty much get everything done that we need to get done. And because of that, because we're not moving around very much, we have, as Dr. Vernikos writes in her book, which is called Sitting Kills, it's a quasi-anti-gravity condition that we have created for ourselves because we're not interacting with gravity. So the component about the reason I talk about this now is because when we do take the time to get motivated and do the work, and this is an issue that I face with a lot of different kinds of people, because I work with long distance, like bucket list marathoners and half marathoners, not real heavy duty athletes, not real, like fast runners, but people that just want to go out and compete recreationally, and they work so hard. And I'm good at what I do, so I get my clients to work really hard. But because the body is sedentary for so much of the non-exercise time in your life, just the beginning of a session can be really damaging to your physique, to the structure of your body internally, to your your skeletal system, and then into your joints, right? So to hard tissues and to soft tissues, not just the soft tissues of your joints, but also your muscles, obviously, and the tendons and ligaments and fascia, all of your body, susceptible to little tweaks, little lesions of frustration, lesions of slight annoyance and agony that produce over time without the proper recovery and rest, that produce the results that you want. They end up working against you. So when you get to that step, that when you cross the Rubicon of, do I work out? Do I go for a run? Do I do this exercise routine with my friend? Do I move, or do I not? There's that additional level of consideration, which is that you've got you want to push yourself, and achieve results, but you also have to be really careful and not hurt yourself, not set yourself up to end up with an unsustainable regimen that ends up creating chronic injury, overuse injury, which happens a lot with these recreational types of bucket list distance runners, and people that go out and do triathlons, the weekend warrior types, the chronic overuse types of injuries that happen are rampant. We know this. We know plantar fasciitis rates are not improving, even though we spend just billions and billions of dollars on good footwear and podiatry and all this other stuff related to prevention of foot issues. We know that we're hurting ourselves when we're out there pushing ourselves. So one of the main concerns that we have to continue to think about is how the difference between, like, the vacillation between that completely sedentary stillness that we encounter for a large part of our lives corresponds to the right level of activity, the right amount of push and energy expenditure to the proportion of rest and recovery time that we need. So that is one of the main things that I really wanted to make sure I started with. The recovery itself. So let's just say for a second, moving on to kind of what specifically is happening, and this is where I'm going to talk about that documentary. I'm telling you, go to Netflix, check it out, or Google Game Changers. I think it might be on Apple as well as Netflix at this point, but I think I was watching it on YouTube. Anyway, find this documentary. It is fascinating because I've always, as a long distance runner myself, and as an aficionado of a real kind of, I have like a sort of a laissez-faire attitude about the sport running, about, kind of just being free. That's really what running is for me. Just being able to be out without any restrictions, to like be free on my feet, be alive, and to enjoy the experience of physical activity. And sometimes running is hard, but most of the time running for me is just really about that. And as a result, I get really, I'm just so, the romanticized kind of opinion I have of the book Born to Run is probably duly noted in the history of the podcasts that I've done and all of the writing that I've done at our website, Body by InShape. Born to Run chronicles a race that was created by this savant, kind of neo-savant, if you will, maybe, named Caballo Blanco. And this was back in the early 2000s. He ended up trying to get together a couple of these of Mexican ultra runners, the Tarahumara Indian tribe, members of this Indian tribe that were very, quietly kind of just running like in a way that we really just only dream about anymore. And then pair this group up with some American runners, and one of the guys that that he writes about that got involved in this race with these ultra runners from the Copper Canyons in Mexico was a guy named Scott Jurek, and he's an ultra runner I didn't think too much of this when I first read this book, but now I'm going to connect back to that documentary because Scott Jurek is also mentioned as one of the subjects in this documentary, Game Changers, about being a vegetarian athlete. And I want to talk about it in terms of recovery, because one of the things that all the experts supposedly talk about when they talk about recovery has to do with the muscle repair, the amino acids that you need to, that your muscles need to repair after really intense workouts, right? There's the lactic acid buildup, and so there's the rest from that. There's the, hydration and the, the ability to restore the loss of electrolytes and those kinds of things. However, Game Changers, this documentary, is a testament to the ability of plant-based foods to do all of the things inside of the body that the body needs, and without the kind of the byproduct gunk that is built up within the bloodstream and in the body when you consume a lot of, maybe any of, but a lot of, I'll just say, animal protein. So I'm not a vegetarian. I am a minimal meat eater, and I do love some ice cream a lot. Actually, I like a lot of ice cream. I consume dairy and eggs, and I definitely eat a little bit of fish and sometimes some meat. But this runner, Scott Jurek, has been I think he's a vegan and has been for some years now, maybe more than 10. And he is one of the subjects of this documentary, which essentially is a mixed martial arts athlete who realizes that there's something to this component of repair that may have been kind of spoon-fed to us incorrectly as athletes, as people who work out. I mean, go to the gym and talk to just a regular trainer who's dealing with a regular client who is just someone, who has an office job and goes to the gym and wants to exercise 3 to 5 times a week as per doctor's recommendations in order to, be healthy, learn to, increase aerobic performance, maybe lose a little bit of weight, yada, yada, yada. You do the workouts and you can hear it. I've heard it so many times. It's like a broken record. Make sure you get, such and such amount of protein post workout to, for muscle repair and recovery. And they always talk about how important it is to have a complete profile of amino acids, and that plant-based proteins aren't complete. So you've got to get some of this stuff from animal fat, animal products, right? Or combine foods in a particular way to get to synthesize the stuff that you need inside from food, or you can do supplements or whatever. Anyway, but these guys have figured out that this might all be total bullshit. Just another element of kind of the corporatized, maybe the highly politicized lobbying efforts of certain powerful forces that tell us something that we know scientifically now that are just simply not true. Whether we want to face the facts or not is obviously up to every individual. But being a vegetarian athlete is not uncommon, as it turns out, because this mixed martial arts athlete start talking to Scott Jurek. So he's a runner, and he talks to a couple of other Olympian runners, and then some cyclists, even some football players from the Miami Dolphins. I was really amazed by this. One of the things that they did with these 3 football players, professional football players, was to get 2 of them to consume, so the meal they selected was burritos. So one of the guys is already a vegetarian, and so the 3 of the guys, they have a day, they eat, each eat a burrito. One has a chicken burrito, one has a bean burrito, one has a beef burrito. And then they take blood analysis. They want to see the separation of the blood fluid, to see the plasma, after it's, what is it called? The centrifugal the machine that separates the fluid. I forgot what it's called. But anyway, so this is one day. And then the next day, all three of them have a bean burrito. So they have the vegetarian blood sample taken. And then you can see the separation of the fluids in the blood vials as the researcher comes back to the three football players and shows each of them there are two blood samples. One, the vegetarian, of course, is the same both days because he's been eating. He ate a bean burrito and a bean burrito. But when you look at the one from the one player who has eaten a beef burrito versus the bean burrito, and same with the chicken burrito, and they're not that much different between the two of them either. By the way, the plasma is really cloudy, which shows the amount of fat that is left over, that is remains inside the bloodstream, which is a component that also creates inflammation in the bloodstream, and how much more difficult it is for the circulatory system to work with and the fluid of the body to complete that process of full recovery after a day's, whatever the day's effort is. So it's really, really fascinating. Inside of your body, it's one of the reasons why, we live sort of at this superficial level where it's almost completely, we don't need to go into the science of it. Even with my clients, I don't really kind of go too much into the specifics of the way that the synthesis of proteins and the restoration of fluids and how certain proteins bind with others. Like, none of that chemistry is all that critical to understand. But the thing that is important is to know that the workouts, the movement, if you are pushing yourself in an exercise regimen that is difficult, if you're pushing yourself to the point of improvement, of performance improvement of some sort, you're generating you're creating damage. It's sustainable damage conducted such that the microfibrous tears that occur within your soft tissues are meant to happen as you push yourself, but by virtue of this conscious effort to improve, and therefore the stuff that happens on the inside of your body, the way that it works, the aftermath, the repair period is also really, really, really important. And that means that when you're making choices about how you schedule exercise sessions in, you really do want to make sure that you adequately rest the body, repair what needs to be repaired, and then proceed accordingly, instead of pushing yourself and pushing yourself right into issues that will cause damage and potentially injury, those overuse injuries. The last thing, which brings me to the last component of this, and we're about 24 minutes in here. I want to make sure that I get finished up before the 30-minute mark. The last thing that I will talk about, transitioning away from how that, it's a tricky and certainly not very black and white profile of decision making that you have to kind of consider. I was actually just interacting with a client online regarding a day with 2 workouts in it, right? So this person writes me really excited about starting the day a couple of days ago with some hardcore boot camp or something, and then, or maybe a spin class, and then the opposite workout was at the end of the day. Now, this is not a person that I, that I have any reason to believe is damaged or injured in any way, shape, or form. But whenever I see recreational exercise participants, and in this case, this is someone training for, a marathon, and so that there's going to be damage done to the body in the process over the period of time when you train for an event. When you're training for a 5K, if you're a sedentary, if you're doing like one of the couch to 5Ks, which I love those, or maybe something a little bit longer, by virtue of just getting out there and preparing your body for that kind of event, you're going to need recovery time. This is a person who's already performed, has already taken part in multiple events over the course of the last several years. So I have no reason to think that she's doing anything specifically damaging, but I always think about the act of like a sedentary person going to 2 workouts in one day, who doesn't really do any physical activity in regular life. And that's where it's key. And that's why some of the less active, more stimulating, sessions. So not workouts. Every workout doesn't have to be an ass kicking, I guess. I'll just say it plainly and with a lot of vulgarity here, but with some vulgar language. But it's just the way it is. Every session doesn't have to be a boot camp or something really intense. When your body, especially if you're a sedentary professional worker, an executive, or working at a desk, or moving minimally through your day, it is much more important to have a regular regimen of stimulating movements that stabilize from the inside out, stabilize your spine, stabilize and prioritize the foundational ability of your pelvis and your shoulder girdle, right? So the core, the ends of the core, right? The core is not just your tummy. It's not your 6-pack abs or lack thereof. Your core, your trunk, is from your neck down to your legs. Includes your chest, your shoulders. I mean, not really, we should include your shoulders, your back, your sides, your tummy, your pelvis, and your butt. So stimulating from the inside out with slow moving, controlled micro movements in dynamic movements, maybe towards the end. If you want to get a little bit of a heart rate boost toward the end of a session, maybe that's okay. But the rule of thumb is to wake up your body, to stimulate and activate all of the components of your kinetic chain that need to be turned on and ready to do their job before your brain is doing your job. So not going to those heavy duty workouts, but taking the time to maybe pamper is a good word for it. I haven't quite figured out the nomenclature that might fit that type of regimen best. If you have any ideas, any good ways to describe it, by all means, get in touch with me. I love coming up with names of things, and this is one. I call them, I call on the other podcast channel that we have here at In Shape Fitness. It's called Muscle Maintenance, and that's kind of what I call it. But that's a little wordy. Anything though that I start out with in my day, a 10 to so maybe 12-minute routine that really isn't very difficult, but it is the thing that I do every single morning to, make sure that my body is ready to start moving around. And that session, that type of session, is just as important as that boot camp or that HIIT training session or whatever it is that you're doing to try and boost your performance. So let me know if you have any questions. Rest is just as important as the routine. And I am here if you need anything. Coach Kim from InShape Fitness in New York City. You can reach me at bodybyinshape.com. Have a great day.